I'm Greg, and you're listening to Totally Preventable.
Totally preventable.
Totally preventable.
Totally preventable. Totally preventable.
Totally preventable.
Totally preventable.
Hi, Greg.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
All right.
What's going on?
Well, let's see. Not a
Not
bunch.
much. Someone's using our dumpster again.
Really?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Investigation going on later
There
on.
we go. And it's a good thing we're investigating and we have our guest for today,
Yeah.
because our guest is from Be Smart for Kids. And we're talking about gun safety. So
Oh, there's a lot of things you could be smart for kids for, but gun safety is a good one.
gun safety is huge. So now we're investigating our dumpster users.
Yeah.
No correlation. There's no parallel.
You know what we find in there. I think it's just cardboard.
All right.
Everyone can rest easy.
But yes, from Be Smart for Kids, we have our Rhode Island lead, Susan Morettini, going to be on the podcast today, talking about Be Smart and what gun safety really looks like in the home.
All right, I'm down.
I know you have some guns.
Do.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got some, we have some former competitive shooters, so yeah, and a farm, so,
That is awesome.
yeah, but gun safety is super important.
So this may be just a review for you.
Maybe,
All right.
maybe.
So without further ado, today joining us on Totally Preventable, the podcast, we have volunteer for Moms Demand Action and the Rhode Island lead of Be Smart for Kids, Susan Morettini. How are you doing, Susan?
I'm doing well. Thank you. And thank you for having me on the podcast. This is kids accessing guns is totally preventable, as we all know.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for being our
Good
guest today.
cause.
We really appreciate you taking the time to join us and to give us some more information about Be Smart.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about this worthy cause. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in this organization?
Sure. I'm a Rhode Island native, and I'm close to 70 years old. I don't mind saying that. I'm a mom, a grandmother, and was raised in a big family. So I have a lot of roots here. And I joined Moms Demand Action in 2019. I was at the State House a lot. And I noticed, for a lot of the legislation, and I noticed moms' red shirts and their determination, and they welcomed me as part of the group. And I basically went to a lot of meetings and hearings at the State House. And then in 2001, I was asked to join the leadership group, and I did. And I've been the Be Smart lead since then.
What can you tell us what is Be Smart for Kids?
Be Smart for Kids it's a campaign that Every Town for Gun Safety developed in 2016, basically after the Sandy Hook shooting, and it's to keep children from accessing guns, so that they don't harm themselves or others. Basically, that's it.
Mm.
Does the SMART stand for something?
It does. So it's an acronym, and it stands for Secure Guns in Homes and Vehicles. That's the S. And the M is to model responsible behavior when handling guns and when around children. And the A is to ask others about whether they have unsecured guns or guns in general in their homes. And this is really important. And this is the tough one, because we want to make it just easy for people to ask. It's not something you'd normally ask. Like you'd say, oh, my child's coming over and my child has a peanut allergy. Do you have any, don't serve peanut butter or what? And, or, when you take the kids, do you have an extra car seat? Do you need one? To normalize saying, oh, and do you have guns in your home, and are they securely locked and kept away from kids? That's not something people normally want to say, but it's so important.
Mhm.
So that's the ask. The R is to recognize the role of guns in suicide. And suicide is a huge problem everywhere, but especially in the United States among teenagers. And most teenagers who do access guns get them from their own home or the home of a family member. And it's to recognize the seriousness of that. And T is to tell others, spread the word, which you're doing right now. Thank you, because this is a totally preventable crisis that we're facing.
Thank you. So
I almost made it.
You did great.
You did great. Is improper gun storage a large problem in the United States?
So in the United States, starting again, there are 13 million households with children under the age of 18 that contain at least one gun. And of those 13 million households, approximately 4.6 million children live in a household with at least one gun that is stored while loaded and unlocked. So that's a lot of opportunity. And you can prevent that by making sure that your guns are securely stored, unloaded, separate from the ammunition, secured with cable locks, and have the ammunition even locked in a separate lock box or firearm safe. So it's a problem. And unfortunately, there are a lot of states that have laws to combat this, the Be Smart laws, that secure gun storage laws, but even those, if they're not always followed through and they don't have a lot of teeth in them. So even when, someone is left out a gun and a child gets it, rarely are they held accountable or pay any penalty.
Wow.
Could you explain unintentional shootings and what that looks like in the United States?
Yeah, so unintentional shootings are clearly nobody wants their kids to gain access to a gun. So it's when the child gets a gun and is playing with it and unintentionally shoots a sibling or themselves, or puts others in harm's way just by having the gun. And that occurs more and more each year. Each year there are more unintentional shootings in the United States. Every town has tracked it, and not an accident index map. And unfortunately, I just looked up the map, and they must be updating it because it's not showing the numbers, but the numbers are horrifying. And kids as young as 2 are getting their hands on guns that are loaded. And in Boston recently, a 7-year-old brought a loaded handgun to school.
Wow.
And luckily, teachers found it and removed it. So that's the adult's responsibility, to make sure that their guns are loaded securely and not accessed by children of any age.
Now, what does proper gun storage look like? How do you help people to understand? Like, for me, I would think that I could store it safely, but I would want it loaded in case of emergency. But you're saying we should separate ammunition from weapon and store them both safely, correct?
Right. So it's most people say, like you just said, well, I have a gun for protection. So if I keep it unloaded, then how am I going to protect myself by the time I get the ammunition in the gun? But that's hardly ever the case. I mean, people who use guns for self-defense in home invasions, it's just so rare. Whereas the instances of children accessing the guns that are loaded is much more prominent and much more of a problem that could be prevented. And, you can put a cable lock on the gun. There are all sorts of different methods, from small storage cases to gun safes. And they're even, I heard that in the last legislation that they're making safes that you can open, by looking at them or just very quickly, and have immediate access to the gun, and then, obviously then the ammunition. So it's something that they're working on to try to make it easier, but the overall problem is, if you leave that gun loaded and if you don't even have children, if you might have a child come visit your home, you might be a grandparent that has a child come visit home, or you might have a neighbor stop by, and that child gets access to the gun, then that's just a preventable tragedy, because someone's very likely going to get shot.
Do you know why people are not responsibly storing their firearms? Like, have you heard from people, like, do they just feel like accidental violence couldn't happen in their home, or do they feel like it's too much of a burden, or are they just not educated on it well enough? Do you know why?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think Be Smart it's all about raising awareness and educating people. Anytime you talk about gun ownership, I think people, start thinking Second Amendment rights, and they get very concerned that you're going to take away their gun, or you're going to restrict anything they can do with their gun. Whereas, our program is just all about keeping them locked and keeping children from accessing them. That's basically it. And I do think it's a lack of education or understanding that how dangerous it is. Just recently in Rhode Island last year, a 16-year-old student was at a friend's house, and they found a loaded weapon on a nightstand. And apparently an uncle of the friend had been staying with them, and he left the gun there. And they played with it, and the student was shot and killed. He was 16. So, and that not only affected his community in Johnston, but he had lots of friends. He was a really popular kid, and it affected all his friends, in communities bordering Johnston, and it's just tragic. And I don't think anyone really knew that the uncle had the gun there. I think, and the uncle was charged, but he didn't get any sort of penalty, or didn't pay a fine. He sort of, because I don't think, he had any sort of record. I don't really know, but I do know that he was let go with probably probation. So that was right here in Rhode Island.
Wow. What advice would you give for parents regarding how to talk to their children about gun safety and proper gun storage?
Yeah, so talking to your children, I think basically, if you see any sort of weapon, or anyone that any of your friends has a weapon, just to get away. Don't touch it, get away, tell an adult. But our message is more for adults, because it's really the adult's responsibility to keep the gun out of the hands of the children. It's not the child's responsibility not to touch a loaded weapon. It shouldn't be there in the first place. It shouldn't be loaded. So our message is more aimed at adults and caregivers. But obviously, I've told my own granddaughter, if you see a gun, don't have anything to do with it. And she actually got a water pistol, and she said, "Grandma, I hope this is okay." And I said, yeah. Your water pistol's fine. So whether, how much she understands, I don't know, but she is thinking about it. And, but it's the parents and the caregivers who really need the message.
So full disclosure, we live on a farm, and we have 4 children. And so part of farm life is critters. And so we have firearms. And when our kids were very young, we taught them about weapons and safety, and not touching them. And if they're at a friend's house, to make sure, if someone else touched, was around them, to let them know not to touch them, and, notify an adult. But we also store them properly. But part of having firearms in our house was not that our kids handled them at the time, but was proper handling of the weapons. And from this two of our children became competitive shooters.
Ah.
And so I'm kind of leading into our next question about how gun safety can become political. And so we're a pretty liberal leaning family, but our kids were taught proper gun safety, even though they were shooters. They did not have access to the weapons unless they were at a competition with a million eyes on them. And as soon as you are do anything unsafe, that's it. Your gun is locked and you're off the range. But I do see it as being very, or perceived as very political. And so I'm curious how you handle that in your organization.
It's not easy because it has been made very political. And I totally agree with you. What you've done, you're a responsible gun owner. There are a lot of responsible gun owners that are part of the Be Smart program because they do it well and they teach their children well, and they want others to do the same thing. So it's not that we don't embrace gun owners, we do. And we do want them to model, that's part of the M, responsible behavior around guns. And yeah, I've lived in New Hampshire, I've lived in Vermont, and there's a big tradition of getting the dare and having guns, and I understand that. And I've been in many homes with guns, and most people had them locked up in gun cases, and I never really worried about whether they were armed or not, or loaded. But in hindsight, maybe I should have. But they were all very responsible. They grew up with the tradition. They were taught well, and it was a big deal for children to join their dads or moms or whoever was going hunting to be able to join in. And it's I get that. So yeah, so you can be a gun owner, you can be a hunter, and you can be responsible, and that's what we ask.
Now, for me, now I have 3 little ones, and just as I was prepping for this podcast and reading the link, and just coming, like I've had to answer and ask the allergy question, for peanut allergies or any other things and snacks could the kids have during play dates, and it has never even come to mind to ask about guns. But I would feel, I don't know, I feel a certain way. Like I think I could ask about alcohol, make sure alcohol is away, but I'd still be a little about it because I'm just assuming, because my kids are so young, that the parent that they're going over, because I would never have the alcohol near children, I'm just assuming that. And I guess what I'm trying to get to is, how would you advise me to start that conversation about, is there guns in the house? Without making it seem like I'm invading their privacy or making them feel like, or making me feel like I'm a stigma of some sort, or like, how would you advise me as a parent to start that conversation when my kids are play date?
That's a very good question. When I first became Be Smart lead, I asked, my children and my children's ex-husbands, and it wasn't easy. It was easy to ask my children, but I know that it seems invasive. But I thought, well, if I can't, talk about this without doing it myself, and it's not easy. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel normal. But wouldn't it be good if it was? Yeah. Wouldn't it be good, considering that firearms is the number one means of death for children? Wouldn't it be nice to have that recognized and make it in, when so many children died in car accidents before they were required to have car seats. I mean, it was easy to talk about, and guns are not easy to talk about. A lot of people hear all the mass shootings and they kind of just don't want to hear it. And and it's not easy. But I think the goal of trying to normalize the conversation is a tough one, but I think it needs to be done. And do I have any suggestions for you? Try it with maybe someone that a family member or a very close friend, just to see the reaction. And I don't know what it's going to be. I know in my case it was fine, but it was hard.
Mhm.
And but I think it needs to be done. And I think with the Be Smart message, so if we'd like to reach out to the medical community and the school community, to have them, spread the word to parents about the importance of secure gun storage. And, if they can talk about it, say at a child's doctor's visit or a school newsletter that goes home. I mean, the more information and awareness that's out there, I think the easier it'll be.
I'm going to offer a suggestion. You
Okay.
can say, I listened to this podcast, or I did this interview, and I didn't realize how much gun violence there was. And it's been brought to my attention that I should ask people if they have unsecured guns in their
That's a great
house. You could sort of put it out like, hey, I didn't realize this. I just heard it. I'm just throwing this out there as a question that I should be asking.
And then would Be Smart suggest that we dig deeper? Because because you're opening my eyes to a lot, and proper gun safety to someone that I'm speaking to may have been before I heard this podcast, may have been, yeah, I keep it locked, it's loaded.
Yeah.
That it's safe, and I would have thought it was safe. But now hearing this, do you suggest digging deeper? Like, okay, so what is safe in your household? Do you suggest that?
Yeah. And even I have when my son-in-law said the exact same thing, he said, well, if I had a gun, which I think he does, how would I get to defend myself if it's unloaded and it's locked and whatnot? And it is a big question. So yeah, I think to dig deeper would be good. Would it be easy? No, but I think it should be done.
All right.
And I think, so if we can get this information home to parents, just the awareness of if you have a gun, keep it securely locked and separate from the ammunition. And if, parents can become comfortable with asking about guns in other people's homes, and if the medical community could, suggest for children's doctor's visits, do you have a gun in the home? Well, this is what think about this to keep your child and other children safe. I think that would be wonderful. I have to say, I've asked my own doctors, different visits, if they knew anything about Be Smart. They didn't. So I told them. So yeah, I think we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, our pediatrician has asked for years about gun safety and guns in the home and all that.
Really?
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
She's in Massachusetts. I don't know if that matters, but ever since the kids were young, and then when she heard they were competing, she would ask more questions about, safety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that.
She's
And
also
I just spoke to a group of students at Rhode Island College. They were studying how guns are impacting people's lives, and as nurses, what they're going to encounter. And they were very interested in the Be Smart program. And I mean, it is going to impact nurses, doctors, people that have to deal with the gun wounds. And so that's, it's a step in getting that word out. And I really appreciate the Rhode Island College professor for asking me in. And I really appreciate you for asking me in for something that's totally preventable.
Can you tell us about the extreme risk law?
So the extreme risk law is, that's the red flag law.
Okay.
And so that's when you know of someone who's might be a threat to themselves or others, and you know that they have or might have access to a weapon, that's when you notify the police or a medical community that you're worried about them. And many states have it, a lot of states have it, but it depends on the police force, whether they're going to use it or not. Lots of times it gets hung up in courts and it doesn't get activated in time. And other times it's used successfully so that the weapons are removed from the home. The person gets counseling and mental health care, and then they determine whether the weapons can be returned. I think that's something we all need to do. We all need to be keeping our friends and our relatives safe from themselves if they're having a mental health crisis.
Absolutely.
You said one thing that we all can do is help get the word out. Be smart for kids. Their word out. What type of resources does Be Smart provide for the community to help get that word out?
Okay, that's a good question. So on the Be Smart website, which I sent to you, it's besmartforkids.org. There are all sorts of resources available that you can just download, and there are flyers, there are handouts for both the school communities and the medical communities. There are presentations that we can give unique to what their job is. And actually in Barrington last year, we managed to get the school committee to adopt a resolution for promoting Be Smart within the schools, which is another thing we can do. Over 2 million students around the country live in school districts that have this type of resolution. And what it means is they will, send home newsletters, and they will try to make all the parents or caregivers aware of the fact that they should securely store their guns. And it's a health, public health crisis that can be averted. So that's some things that can be done and that are being done.
Mhm. I think some police stations too offer free gun locks. I don't know if it ebbs and flows with funding, but for a while our police station had free gun locks available in their lobby. So
Great.
you could probably always reach out to them, and if you needed them, I'm sure they would find a way to help you.
I know in Rhode Island there's not all police stations, but there's a number of police stations you can get free gun locks from. And also, many police stations have a safety day for families, and usually secure gun storage is part of that safety day. And I've actually provided materials for that.
Oh.
So working with the police, working with educators, medical professionals, it's all very important.
Awesome.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So what would be the best way for the community to get in touch with you to maybe collaborate or partner up with Be Smart?
Okay, the best way would be to email me, which is fine. Do you want my email?
Sure.
Okay, it's SEMORETTINI@gmail.com. Also, Moms Demand Action could be, you could contact Moms Demand Action. You could contact Everytown. They both have websites, and I think that's the best way. It's a national organization. So, but we do have our representatives in Rhode Island.
That's great.
Great. Thank you so much. You've given us so much information.
Thank you. I found I did much better when I didn't try to access all my data. And thanks for having me, because this is such an important issue, and it is totally preventable. And I thank you for what you do, bringing other issues that are totally preventable to the public. And thank you. It's an important thing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
you-
you. The work you're doing is just as important. We really appreciate
Thank you.
it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
I'm Polly, and you've just listened to Totally Preventable.
Totally preventable.